I am less interested in the interior person, morally speaking, than you are. Largely, I do believe, because I come from a behaviorist, law-based religion. We care how you act. That's why we don't have a claim that if you look at another woman with lust, it's as if you've committed adultery with her. There's only one way to commit adultery in Judaism, and it's with a different organ. And I'm not being cute, I'm being very realistic. Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
What's the stance on pornography? So
pornography, when I'm asked this question, when it's raised on my radio show, I have a male-female hour, I always ask if a wife calls me and says my husband looks at pornography, I found on his computer, I have one question. How is your life of intimacy with your husband? Is it good? In other words, is the pornography in lieu of you or in addition to you?
Corn, you know, cuckoldry, voyeurism. Hey, yo, turns out Big Denny Doggers really likes to watch some Denny's dogging. Do you ever just, I don't know, want to just stare at some stranger that you find attractive and, you know, just watch and look and really engage with that feeling that you got inside of you? That feeling is like, I don't know. I mean, my wife's getting a little jealous here. Maybe I shouldn't do that thing. But, you know, there's no specific mandate in the Old Testament that says what I'm doing is wrong. But apparently our favorite little P-dog, big old Denny P, apparently that's what he's into. Classic pastime, I know, and what's it? Lust, that's what it's called. The oil baron himself has made an argument that, ooh boy, lust ain't that bad. Actually, lust's not too bad at all. No, the conversation on lust, old news, you know, been there, done that, you know, Jesus said all the things and, you know, think it'd be done, but well, here we are. But I wasn't expecting big old Dennis the Menace here to be like, hey yo fam, I mean, if it's for the boys, who is this Denny P? Big old Dennis Prager. Prager University. I had to Google when I was like 16. It's not a real university, trust me. But the Den Dog, he's a big old name amongst like American conservatism, blah, blah, blah. He's like your Jordan Petersons, your Ben Shapiro's, your, I don't know, whatever their names are. This guy looks like the Joker. And there's also Dennis P. Dog. In this video, I'm gonna be reacting to wee Prager D myself. I'm gonna make the points throughout this entire video that not just is Dennis Maybe It's Your Fault Prager's theological argument on lust incorrect, but I'm gonna do so without ever appealing to Jesus or the New Testament. And so, I'm gonna appeal to his sources. I'm gonna appeal to Genesis. Let's have fun, let's go, let's do it.
I am less interested in the interior person, morally speaking, than you are, and probably any of you are, and it's largely, I do believe, because I come from a behaviorist, law-based religion. We care how you act. That's why we don't have a claim that if you look at another woman with lust, it's as if you've committed adultery with her.
So, in this opening statement, he sets up a lot of the presuppositions that we can just expect from the rest of his argument. From Dennis Prager fan, we are apparently discovering that for him, Judaism is this behavioral, actions-based, and let's not really concern all too much about the heart, religion. And in contrast to that, we have Christianity, which is this, you know, heart-based. We care about the actions, but we also care about where the actions are stemming from. Religion. If his assumptions about each given religion are correct, then perhaps we can have a basis from which we understand what he is trying to communicate. This would explain why he doesn't seem to think lust is a terribly big deal. After all, lust isn't something you do, it's something that begins within the heart. And so, it seems as though for him, what is important is whether or not the Torah has explicitly stated, hey yo fam, hey don't do that thing, nah, it's not good. But is that a good enough basis for him to make his argument entirely from?
There's only one way to commit adultery in Judaism, and it's with a different organ. And I'm not being cute, I'm being very realistic. looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism. It's not. There's no ban in the 613 laws of the Torah on lusting.
Now, Big Denner's claim that, there's no ban in the Torah on lust is true. However, I don't particularly think that's relevant. This says something. So, the conversation that we want to have is not whether or not lust is legally permissible within the Torah. The conversation we want to have is whether or not lust is sin. And that's not the same thing. But why is that the opposite? Because we understand that not everything that is legally permissible within the Torah is also righteous. We understand that polygamous marriage in the Torah is permissible, but we're not going to go out here and say, hey, yo, fam, that's a righteous thing to be going to do. And we understand that divorce in the Torah is permissible, but not righteous. This is because we can recognize that something is not good or bad because of its conformity to a law or rule. Something is good or bad because of the nature of the thing in itself, independent of the laws which surround it.
I just wanted you to know, it seems like you got a little confused last time. You confused sinning with legality.
Now, to my retractors, but the opposite. Are you saying that God would allow some imperfections, some sins to be, within his perfect Old Testament? Or something along those lines. No, I don't want it to sound like I'm discrediting the Torah. Mwah. Love it. Freaking brilliant. Good stuff. Real fine dining that thing is. But we also kind of got to acknowledge as one of these guys, we kind of got to acknowledge that the Torah has a specific purpose to it, and it came out of a specific context, and so it needs to be treated as such. Now, what our favorite silly oil baron seems to be doing is taking the Torah and then applying it very intuitively into his own socio-religious context without really considering what the hermeneutical implications are that his methodology has on the text. Now, something that big old Johnny Walto and the late Michael Heiser, bless his soul, went on and on about is...
If you just read the Bible with the ancient Israelite in your head, just try to read it through their eyes. Don't make it use your vocabulary. Don't make it answer your questions. The Bible was written to them, but it's written for our benefit. But it wasn't written to us. It's written for us.
An Israelite thought more like a Babylonian than they think like us.
We need to understand that, whilst the text is divinely inspired, and we're not going to be doubting that one for a second, it is also an accommodation to the specific historically conditioned culture from which the text finds itself. In other words, whilst God divinely inspires Torah, he does not divinely inspire the culture from which Torah originates. Consequently, you're going to find within the Torah some of God's accommodations to the sinful and hardened hearts of the Hebrew people from that time, whilst still working through these people in order to accomplish his goals. Necessarily, this is going to include accommodating to the ancient Hebrew/Near Eastern context that has its own understanding of reality. Now, we've talked a lot about accommodation just in those last couple minutes. Is God's accommodation to the historical context of Israel a weakness on God's part? According to, let's say, Muslims and various Protestant fundamentalists, it's a bit of a weakness. But that's not how God do. That's not how God does. God's accommodation to humanity is no more a weakness than any time he ever chooses to work through humanity in order to accomplish his goals, which, when we read the Bible, hey yo fam, you ever notice how most of the time when God does something, he does it through humanity? The only time he never does it through humanity is when, a little secret, when we don't exist. So before creation. My point in this section is not to communicate that the Torah is irrelevant or bad in any way. Absolutely not. And it's certainly not irrelevant for a modern context. I'd say far from it. Rather, I'm simply providing an explanation for why I think that the big old prawn star has made his claim from a poor basis, which then leads to his conclusions also being wrong. I don't particularly think Denny's is working with any of these, propositions in mind when he's talking. Rather, I think he's intuiting the Torah right into his own socio-religious and cultural context without considering from where the Torah came and how the divine inspiration of Torah interacted with the humanity and cultural context of the time. Consequently, I think Boy is doing some bad hermeneutics. Simple. Now, if you want to hear more about the interactions between human and divine authorship, then, pardon me, go watch this video right here. I talk all sorts of smack about that. It's a great time, go watch it. Because if you've ever throughout the segment thought to yourself, hey, yo, looks like theocracy doesn't particularly like scripture all that much, I prove you wrong in that video. But if I don't think DP's making this argument off a good basis, what then should we think is a good basis for us to argue whether or not lust is sin? I'm gonna say, let's go to the start. Let's go visit Genesis.
So God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them.
Whoa, dude is in some water now. Wow, this really says something about the topic we're about to discuss. Dirt. Whoa, dirt. Hey, looks like God creates Adam, forms him out of some dirt. You know, molds dude together and then, I don't know, just like breathes right into dude's nostrils. Image of God, Imago Dei. Banter, fun, thank you very much. However, in contrast to Adam's forming, we also see a load of other little creation myths coming from that same ancient Near Eastern context that the Hebrew account came out of. Maybe we'll discuss some of them momentarily. So, in Atrahasis, banger story, the Akkadian creation myth, humanity is formed, similar to Adam, out of dirt and clay. However, this dirt and clay is also mixed with the blood of a sacrificed god. Eli or Eloella. However, within that story, humanity is created out of chaos and bloodshed, kind of just for the purpose of being slave labor to the gods. Next story, Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation myth. Once again, we see dudes being created out of clay, but also the clay is mixed with, on screen right there, 3 options. Which one do you think's the right one? Is it this one or is it? It's the one with the blood. In Enuma Elish, Marduk, the chief god, slaughters like some demon god called Kwingu. Thank you very much, Kwingu. And with his blood creates humanity. Mostly as a creative afterthought where Marduk's like, yeah, well, we need slaves. Now, some of us might be thinking to ourselves, whoa dudes, these other alternative creation myths, they sound pretty cool. Why can't the Genesis account be so creative and why can't they be so fun? However, what it is that makes these other creation accounts so stark in contrast to the Hebrew account is every other time humanity is created, it's through bloodshed, death, chaos, and war. Humanity, thereby, is simply the product of such chaos and disorder. And if this was so, then it doesn't take a lot of logical leaps to see how this sort of origin can be a fairly easy justification for all the various atrocities that have happened, especially in those ancient times, and is used as a justification for all sorts of disorders and behavioral bents that we often sometimes have participated in, whether it's war, hatred, lies, or adultery. After all, if the gods participate, if Marduk and Enlil participate in all this disorder and chaos, then why can't we? Why shouldn't I also participate in this? After all, are we much better than the gods? I doubt it. Yet, as Adam is formed, Yahweh has no need for this bloodshed in order to animate the body of Adam into life. All dude needs to do is breathe. Now, this demonstrates for us, at the very least, 2 things. 1, Yahweh is the source of life, and doesn't seem to see the need for going to war with chaos by slaughtering it, but rather, Yahweh brings order out of the chaos by just commanding it, just being like, hey yo fam, sit down. Number 2, Yahweh is intimate, personal, and interested in his creation. Unlike in the Akkadian and Babylonian creation myths, where we're just kind of the creative afterthoughts of the gods, at the very least, and at the very most, we are actively created to be slaves. In the Hebrew account, humanity is created with dignity as the image of God. So, when Yahweh creates us from order through his animating breath, and then proceeds to assign us his image, imago Dei, we can trust that dude's not creating us for some arbitrary reason, unlike the pagan gods. We can absolutely trust that he's not creating us to be participants in chaos and disorder, but rather, we too are participants with him over creation to bring order out of chaos, to spread and expand, the borders of the Garden of Eden. And so Yahweh assigns Adam all sorts of kinds of authority over creation. But yet, Yahweh notices, the dude's lonely. And that's no good. Public service announcement. Hey, do you ever just think to yourself, whoa, I like this content that this dude makes. I want the help. I just don't know how. Does the content make you giggle? Does it make you think, that's informative? Is it like and subscribe? That's easy. It's as easy as that. Which do you value more, your life or the likes and subscribes? We know the answer, and I think you want to share this content with your friends now, maybe even your youth pastor. And you know what? Even if you don't like the content, just do it anyway. It doesn't hurt. And do it.
And the Lord God said, It is not good that the man should be alone. I will make him an helpmeet for him.
I will make him a helper, comparable to him. I will make a helper suitable for him.
Now, that word that we just heard, helper, gets translated from the Hebrew term Ezer, which, according to a little Faith Life Bible study right here, broadly refers to as a rendering aid. According to Hebrew word lessons, thank you very much, free resource apparently, the word means helper, to help. Now, I'm under an impression that in our funny little contemporary context that some dudes like to call clown world, fantastic, some of us might be hesitant towards hearing our entire half of the human population get described in the origin account as a helper to a man, as if to say that one might have superiority over the other, or that sure, the text says helper and that's nice, but actually it's just a nice way of saying slave. To which my response, what's my response? What's your response to the opposite? I get it, I understand. The conversation that we usually have today around misogyny and the place and roles of women, particularly when it's relative to men, and the distrust that is built between the genders. Good times. Oh boy, love it. Hats off to you, Gender Wars. My favorite sci-fi fantasy. But when we hear the conversation, especially coming from dudes behind pulpits who effectively are like, woman talk, shut up, sit down, go home, woman. And so when you hear from dudes like that, especially saying, hey yo, Eve is the helper, I can understand the hesitancy. However, often is the case that meaning and intent is lost in the translation of language through culture and time. And so, I'm gonna throw out some guesses here. If God's initial design for Adam, in contrast to the pagan gods, is for dignity and purpose, to reflect the goodness of God in creation, my guess is that it's not going to be very different at all for Eve. But so that we can have some assurance in that idea, to really, be like, yeah, for us to be able to justify the equality of dignity and purpose between the two genders, I think it might be a good idea for us to do a little bit of a word study on Ezer. And what is Ezer? According to Hebrew word lessons and big baddie John Walton, the term appears around 21 different times throughout the Old Testament. Twice during the creation narrative to refer to the Edenic woman, once to describe the Hebrew people and how they won't be helpers to Egypt anymore, once explaining that the Prince of Jerusalem is gonna be thrown into Babylon, what have you, and his helpers will be scattered to the wind, and every other time, Ezer gets used to refer to God. Now, Faith Life Study Bible says, quote, while used to refer to subordinates, the word does not necessarily imply inferiority. God is called Israel's helper. Now, I want to react a little bit to Faith Life's little definition for Ezer. Their inclusion of that word, subordinate. I mean, it's all well and dandy that they made a distinction between subordinate and inferiority. Thanks, Faith Life, that's real cool. But I find the idea of saying that the word does not necessarily imply inferiority kind of meaningless if we're going to say that Ezer is in fact a subordinate help, because subordination implies that there is some kind of hierarchy of status going on. So for Faith Life to say, hey yo fam, I mean, it says a subordinate but it doesn't necessarily imply inferiority, is, as far as I'm concerned, a distinction without a difference. So some examples of subordinate helpers could be, slaves, personal assistants, employees, someone who does something for you because you're too big and important and special to go ahead and do that thing for yourself, or simply because power dynamics between the relationship are in your favor because you're the superior. Subordinate help. But we know full well that not all helpers are subordinates. Some are equals, like friends and partners and peers. And some helpers are also superiors, like teachers and mentors and God. And Ezer is someone who serves us, works for, but alongside us, helps us. And God does all of these things for us, which is why he too gets referred to as our Ezer. But, come here. You better bet you silly little arse that God's not our subordinate. Trempelongment 3, ayo, big baddie over here, thinks that Ezer is best, described as someone who is an ally, and that any view of Ezer that seems to imply subordination is just simply incorrect. John Walton seems to say something very similar to Tremper after having provided the same examples that Hebrew word lessons provides, concludes saying that there's nothing subservient about the status of Ezer. In fact, certainly, helper cannot be understood as being the opposite of leader. And so, what's my point? Hey yo fam, what's the point? My ultimate point about the definition of Ezer is that, yeah, it refers to some kind of help. However, any conversation that we have about its definition that implies hierarchy, whether superiority or inferiority, is ultimately irrelevant. Now, around 17 times, apparently, God in the Old Testament gets referred to as Ezer, as Israel's Ezer. But Eve is the first one titled Ezer even before God is. And so if the Edenic example comes prior to the divine relationship between God and Israel, then we can probably say that this use of Ezer that we receive for God's relationship to Israel is supposed to make us go back and think about the Edenic Ezer.
Very nice.
A definition for Ezer that I find particularly useful from a friend of mine, that it is a necessary help outside of yourself. John Mark Comer states something very similar to that, saying, one who comes alongside to help achieve a goal. And so it's not good that Adam's alone, and God creates for him an Ezer, a suitable help for him to achieve the goals that God sets in front of him to achieve. And so without this Ezer, humanity is incapable of fulfilling the purposes for humanity that God set before us. And so, what is Ezer? Ezer is not someone who is, your servant, your slave, someone that you can tell to go do that thing because you're better than them. Ezer is more akin to being someone that you are shoulder to shoulder with, someone who helps you achieve something because you're not capable of doing it yourself, a partner, an ally, a friend. An Ezer is a dignified status, and that should be obvious given that, God gets referred to as Israel's Ezer. Eve, as Adam's Ezer, is not an insult. It is not a bad thing. It is beautiful and good. But that said, how many Ezer does Adam need?
We have no equivalent that if you look upon another woman with lust, it's as if you have committed adultery with your heart. There's only one way to commit adultery in Judaism, and it's with a different organ. And I'm not being cute, I'm being very realistic. looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism. In other words, is the pornography in lieu of you or in addition to you?
Now, one such relational prescription that we can see from within the Edenic narrative is to meet the basic needs for intimacy between human beings. Adam's needs for companionship being utterly failed by the animals. Oh, thankfully. That could have been cringe. His satisfaction being met with a partner instead, and the vulnerable intimacy that the two are able to share together. Now, I don't think that it necessarily follows that this intimacy must be sexual, as there's all sorts of varieties of intimacy that can be shared between all sorts of people, like friends, family, community, partners, and God. It's just that in the Edenic prescription for sexual intimacy, it is solely to be held between two spouses. This relational intimacy is something that is alluded to by all sorts of commentators, but unfortunately they don't really oftentimes go into much depth on it. Atkinson, an Anglican over here, in his commentary he probably goes into the greatest amount of depth, at least within all the commentaries that I've been reading. However, nonetheless, we are left in a dilemma here. So, God creates Adam, but Adam notices that dude's alone. He notices that every other beast and creature, they have their partner, they have their counterpartner, their equivalent. Except the dude, except the big man. Dude notices he's alone. So God fashions him a counterpartner, a helper, and a Ezer for Adam. Congrats, buddy, congrats, pal, you're not alone anymore, and that's lovely. But how many Ezer does Adam need? As Darling Denner stated,
men want variety.
Good for men, but how much variety does Adam need? Now, let's just say, hypothetically, that Eve is just happens to be unsuccessful at fulfilling Adam's sexual desires. Wee pet, bless her wee soul. What should Adam do now? Should the dude appeal to God again and be like, I mean, it was nice, it was a nice thought, but can maybe just create some more women so that I can, gaze on them. And I'll stay with the wife, stay with the one you give me, but some other women to look at could be nice. Maybe a selection, maybe an entree of women for me to dazzle my gaze upon and enjoy. Not have sexual relations with, just look at. Should Adam seek his sexual fulfillment in the gaze of other women? Should Adam seek his fantasies not just be fulfilled in Eve, but also maybe Samantha and Rachel and Jennifer also? After all, apparently according to Prager's position on lust, that it's not sin.
Looking with lust is not a sin in Judaism.
Adam's gazing on these alternative women isn't necessarily wrong. It's just him exercising his wants for variety. And so it would follow that this would be a completely viable option for the so far sinless Adam to engage in, so long as there are other women available and he doesn't let his gazing follow into action. However, to say that men want variety as a justification for gazing at other ladies, it doesn't logically end at the gazing. As one of the dudes in the little panel over here pointed out,
it's a desire, doesn't stop halfway.
Right, to take.
It takes action.
It's to take.
So if men want variety, and the only sin to explicitly avoid is straight up adultery, so what is stopping Adam from not just gazing at Rachel and Samantha and Jennifer also, if any of y'all are watching Saws, but following through into marriage? Just marry the lot of them all. And in that way, his desire for sexual variety meets its logical conclusion. At least according to Torah law, this is an option that is on the table. Maybe Adam never, has a wee peek and a stare, entirely because he's never been given the opportunity. After all, in Eden, there's no other women to look at. It's just him and Eve. But how will he, fulfill his desire for variety now? And so, here's the dilemma that I see. 1. If Adam seeks after variety, as men want, he will be incapable of finding that variety by the lack of access. 2. Either this incapability is a complete non-issue and the solution is staring at us in the face. You want variety? Seek it entirely in your wife. Or this is a real issue and Adam has no solution due to the lack of access. Now, if it's a non-issue, then it would be wrong of Adam to ever seek any of his desires fulfilled in a source outside of his wife, which follows then that lust is sin, because that is to seek your desires satisfied in a source outside your wife. Whether it's gazing or its logical conclusion actually following through. Or we're wrong, and in fact, we should be looking to God to be like, you need to provide the dude with some more sources, man. And you know what? Maybe God is in the wrong. Maybe he should have provided Adam some more women for him to just look at in his spare time. But if God does provide Adam with some more women to lust after, how much of that variety is enough to satiate his thirsts? As we see later on in Genesis, as sin becomes a reality, that, fun times, all sorts of dudes take my little polygamous prescription and run with it. And the narrative critique of this polygamy is, it's apt. As when these men seek their sexual satisfaction to be found in other women, other sources outside their sole wife, it always leads to relational and familial dysfunction. Be it Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, pick your dude, then, bad, never great. Now, let's just assume for a moment, let's hypothetically speaking, that within Eden, there are in fact other individuals that exist alongside Adam and Eve. It's just that the narrator is not terribly interested in telling us about it. If so, then there are also other women within the garden that Adam could, if he so choose, lust after. And yet, the narrator is only interested in discussing with us the sole couple, just the Edenic couple. And so the narrative choice of the author is to really hyperfixate. The narrative choice that the author made here in solely focusing on the Edenic couple and no other dudes in the garden should be strikingly telling to us as readers to what God's interests are for the marital relationship. So whether or not Eden has a population of 2 people or 200 people, I don't particularly think matters, as I think nonetheless the relational prescription, the takeaway from this narrative remains the same. Now, we can't necessarily use Adam's behavior as our prescription, as even if there are other dudes in the garden, we don't necessarily know whether or not Adam would have or would not have lusted after them. We can, however, use God's providing for Adam his relational needs and the lack of women for, Adam to just lust all over within the narrative as God's prescription for an Edenic sexual ethic. And so, women to lust after, as in need, is not provided for. Astonishing and amazing. I know. See you next time. Hey, what's up, friends? We've reached the end of the video. Congratulations, you did it. You have concluded that, whoa, maybe lust is a sin after all. What was I doing listening to big old Prager dongs thinking to myself, lust isn't that bad. Lust isn't that bad. Whoa! You thought lust wasn't that bad? What are you, goblin? What are you, a little troglodyte? Oh, not anymore. You're not a little troglodyte anymore. You can leave the cave now. You can exit the damp cold and in fact go outside and feel the sun hit your skin and touch some grass. And now that we know together that, whoa, women are human beings and not objects of my desire, you can become cool. You can become the guy, the man, but most importantly, the human being. Wow, what a beautiful world we live in. Hit that like, subscribe, send it to your friends, and let's radicalize all the youth pastors together. Some acknowledgements that I want to make to some dudes who helped me make this video, to Paul Anleitner, an intellectual I really love, and sent the dude my script, and he was like, impressive. And some other dudes like Ethan Cathro, who I had a conversation about my script to, and Jake Marlowe, the Academy podcast, both of whom make content on the internet in some shape or form. One's a podcast and the other's a YouTuber. Figure out which one it is. But most importantly, I would like to acknowledge my wife, the lady who helped me make this content and helped me come to some of my theological conclusions. And without her, my own little Ezer, how fitting, the video may not have looked the same. So, thank you very much, Mrs. Theocracy. Very cool. So, that's it. And, whoa. What's that? What? A flag? Whoa! That's right. I live in the United States now. Not a joke. IRL. Real.
An Israelite thought more like a Babylonian than they think like us.